Chapter we on, everybody?
Chapter 3.
Cowboy. We got a cowboy in our chapters. Cowboy in our midst. Okay. Omri gaped at him. He hadn't thought of this. But of course, now that he did, it was obvious. No boy who knew the secret could possibly rest until he had a little live person of his own. Patrick, it's not like you think. Just something to play with. Of course not. You've explained all about it. Just now let me put... But you have to think about it first. No, stop. You can't yet. And anyway, I don't agree to you using one of mine. Omri didn't know why he was so reluctant. It wasn't that he was mean. He just knew somehow that something awful would happen if he let Patrick have his own way. But it wasn't easy to stop him. Omri had grabbed him, but he wrenched free. I've got to! He stretched out his hand toward the pile of soldiers again, and they struggled. Patrick seemed to have gone a bit crazy. Suddenly, Omri felt the rim of the tin plate under his shifting feet. He shoved Patrick out of the way, and they both stared downward. The plate had tipped. The fire slipped off into the carpet. Little Bear, with a yell, had leaped clear and was now waving his arms and shouting horrible things at them. His roast meat had disappeared under Omri's foot, which instinctively stamped down on the fire to put it out. He felt a squishy feeling under his shoe. Now look, we've spoiled the meat, he shouted at Patrick. If all you can do is fight, I wish I'd never brought you. Patrick looked mullish. It was your fault. You should have let me put something in the cupboard. Omri lifted his shoe, and underneath was a nasty mess of burned stuff, squashed meat, and a bent erector set. Little Bear let out a wail. You no great spirit, only stupid boy. Fight, spoil good meal. You feel shame. Oh, maybe we can rescue it? He crouched down and disentangled the meat from the mess, burning his fingers. He tried to brush it clean, but it was no use. It was all mixed up with the smelly stuff of the firelighter and stuffed with bits of carpet hairs. I'm terribly sorry, Little Bear, he mumbled. No good, sorry. Little Bear hungry, work all day, cook meat. Now what eat? I chop you down like tree. And to Omri's horror, he saw Little Bear run to where the battle axe was lying, pick it up, and advance toward his legs, swinging in great circles as he came. Patrick fairly danced with excitement. Isn't he fantastically brave, though? Much more than David with Goliath. Omri felt the whole thing was going too far. He moved his leg from harm's way. Little Bear, calm down. I said I'm sorry. Little Bear looked at him, blazing-eyed. Then he rushed over to the chair Omri used as his table and began chopping wedges out of it. Stop! Or I'll put you back in the cupboard. Little Bear stopped abruptly and dropped the axe. He stood with his back to them, his shoulders heaving. I'll get you something to eat right now. Something delicious. Go and paint. It'll make you feel better. I won't be long. And to Patrick he said, hang on, I can smell supper cooking. I'll go and get a bit of whatever we're having. Then he rushed downstairs without stopping to think. What is that? What does the author mean when he says, without stopping to think? Ariana.
That Patrick might put the Indians in the cupboard while he's getting food.
Oh, you used a plural form.
Because he was too focused on...
Oh no.
What if he gets like 20 World War II soldiers? What?
No, it's gonna be either World War
Like Hitler.
soldiers
What if he
and
gets
the
Hitler?
cowboy or just the cowboy. One of those two.
Okay, do you remember the title of this chapter?
Cowboy.
Was it singular or plural?
Singular.
Okay, so that helps a little bit. We can infer from the title what is about to happen, right? His mother was dishing up a nice hot stew. Can I have a tiny bit of that, Mom? Just a little bit. And a spoon. It's for a game we're playing. His mother obligingly gave him a big spoonful. Don't let it trip. Does Patrick want to stay for supper? I don't know. I'll ask. Were you two fighting up there? I heard thumps. Oh, no, not really. It was just that he wanted to do something that Omri stopped dead, as if frozen to the ground. He might have been frozen. His face was so cold. Patrick was up there with the cupboard and 2 biscuit tinsfuls of little plastic figures. What word is next? Everyone read it.
Alone.
Oh no.
Alone, yes.
Oh,
Not
no.
home. It's alone.
Omri ran. He usually won the egg and spoon race at school, at the school sports, which was just as well. It's hard enough to carry an egg and a spoon running along that flat field. It's a great deal harder to carry a tablespoon of boiling hot stew steady while you rush up a flight of stairs. It's almost as if there were if most of it was still there when he got to the top, it was more by good luck than skill, because he was hardly noticing the spoon at all. All he could think of was what might be, no, must be happening in his room, and how much more of it would happen if he didn't hurry. He burst in through the door and saw exactly what he dreaded. Patrick bent over the cupboard, just turning the key to open it. What? Omri gasped out between panting breaths, but he had no need to go on. Patrick, without turning around, opened the cupboard and reached in. And when he did, then he did turn. He was gazing into his cupped hands with eyes like huge marbles. He slowly extended his hands toward Omri and whispered, "Look." Omri, stepping forward, had just time to feel intensely glad that at least Patrick had not put a whole handful of figures in, but had only changed one. Which he leaned over, then drew back with a gasp. It was the cowboy and his horse. The horse was in an absolute panic. It was scrambling about wildly in the cup of Patrick's hands, snorting and pawing up one minute and down its side on the next. Stirrups and reins flying. It was a beautiful horse, snow white with a long mane and tail, and the sight of it acting so frightened gave Omri heart pains. As for the cowboy, he was too busy dodging the horse's flying feet and jumping out of the way when it failed to notice how much about its surroundings. So go back to Omri having heart pains. What word did I use earlier to show Omri's feelings? If he's having heart pains for the horse, what is he feeling? Do you remember the word? It starts
Empathy.
Empathy. Very good, Vincent. He's feeling empathy, so it shows Omri is empathetic. He probably thought he was caught in an earthquake. Omri and Patrick watched, spellbound, as a little man in his plaid shirt, buckskin trousers, high-heeled leather boots, and a big hat scrambled frantically up the side of Patrick's right hand and, dodging through the space between his index finger and thumb, swung himself clear of the horse, only to look down and find his feet dangling over empty space. His hat came off and fell, slowly like a leaf, down, down, down to the floor, so infinitely far below. Okay, go back to that line. His hat came off and fell, slowly like a leaf. What kind of figurative language is that, you guys?
Simile.
Beautiful. Simile. How do we know it's a simile?
Because it uses like or as.
Nice. The cowboy gave a yell and scrabbled with his feet against the back of Patrick's hand, hanging on for dear life to the ridge beside his thumbnail. "Hold your hand still," commanded Omri to Patrick, who in his excitement was jerking them nervously about. There was a moment of stillness. The horse stood up, trembling all over, prancing about with terror. Beside his hoofs was some tiny black thing. Omri peered closer. It was the pistol. The cowboy had now recovered a little. He scrambled back through the finger gap and said something to the horse that sounded like, "Whoa, back steady, fella." And then he slid down and grabbed the reins, holding them just below the horse's nose. He patted its face, that seemed to calm it, and then, looking around swiftly, but not apparently noticing the enormous faces hanging over him, he reached cautiously down and picked up the pistol from between the horse's hooves. "Whoa there," stand. Omri watched like a person hypnotized. He wanted to cry out to Patrick that it was a real gun, but somehow he couldn't. He could only think that the sound of his voice would throw the horse once more into a panic, that the horse or man would get hurt. Instead, he watched while the cowboy pointed the gun in various directions warily. And then he lowered it. Still holding the reins, he moved until he could press his hand against Patrick's skin, and then he let his eyes move upward toward the curved fingers, just level with the top of his head. What the doggone heck? It sure looks like a great big... Oh, what am I talking about? It can be. Heck, it just ain't possible. But the more he looked, the more certain he must have become that he was indeed in a pair of cupped hands. And finally, after scratching his gingery head for a moment, he ventured to look right up past the fingers, and then, of course, he saw Patrick's face looking right at him. There was a petrified moment when he couldn't move, and then he raised his pistol in a flash. Patrick, shut your eyes! Bang! It was only a little bang, but it was a real bang, and a puff of real gun-smelling smoke appeared. Patrick shouted with pain and surprise and would have dropped the pair if Omri hadn't thrust his hand underneath to catch them. Patrick's own hand had clapped itself to his cheek. Ow! Ow! He shot me! Patrick screamed. Omri was not much bothered about Patrick at that moment. He was furious with him and very anxious about the little man and his horse. Quickly he put them down on the bed, saying like a cowboy himself, "Steady, whoa, I won't hurt you, it's okay." Ow! Patrick kept yelling, "It hurts! Ow!" "Serves you right, I warned you," said Omri, and then he felt sorry and said, "Well, let's have a look." Gingerly, Patrick took his own hand down, and a drop of blood had smeared his cheek. And by peering very close, Omri could see something like a bee's stinger embedded in his skin. "Hang on, I see it. I'll squeeze it out." Ow! A quick squeeze between his thumbnails, and the almost invisible speck of black metal, which had only just penetrated the skin, popped out. "He shot me!" Patrick got out again in a shocked voice. "I told you, my Indian stuck me with a knife," said Omri, not to be outdone. "I think we ought to put him back. Your cowboy, I mean. Of course not my Indian." "Put him back where?" Omri explained how the cupboard could change him back to plastic again. But Patrick wasn't having any of that. "Oh, no, I want him. He's terrific. Look at him now." Patrick feasted his eyes admiringly on the little cowboy, who, ignoring the giants, whom he clearly thought he must have imagined, was doggedly dragging his horse across Omri's quilt as if he were wading through the dunes of some infinite pale blue desert. Omri reached for him determinedly, but Patrick stepped into his path. "Don't you touch him. I bought him. I changed him. He's mine." "You bought him for me. You said you didn't want him." "Well, but the cupboard's mine, and I told you not to use it. And so what if I did? Anyway, he's done. He's alive now, and I'm keeping him. I'll bash you right in if you try to take him. Wouldn't you bash me in if I took your Indian?" Omri was silent. That reminded him. Where was Little Bear? He looked around. He soon spotted him at the other end of the room, busy with his paints. Some beautiful, minute designs showing turtles, herons, and beavers, mainly in red and yellow, had appeared on the side of the teepee Omri had made. As Omri crouched beside him to admire them, Little Bear, without looking at him, said, "You bring food. I very soon die, if not eat." Omri looked around. What had he done with a spoonful of stew? But he soon saw that he put it down on the table without thinking, and there it sat, tilting slightly and spilling a few drops of gravy, but still steaming. He hurriedly to get to Little Bear's, or rather Action Man's, mess tin. The paper plate had gotten all soggy, and he carefully filled it with hot, savory stuff. "Here you are." Little Bear stopped work, laid down his paintbrush, and sniffed eagerly. "Ah, good. He sat down cross-legged among the paint lids to eat, dripping some of yesterday's stale bread in as a spoon. Your wife cook? Ah, no, Little Bear forgot. Omri not got wife. He ate ravenously for a few moments, and then he said, not want? I'm having mine downstairs in a minute. Mean Omri not want wife? Said Little Bear, who was now in a much better mood. I'm not old enough. Little Bear looked at him for a moment. No, I see. Boy. He grinned. Big boy. But boy. He went on eating. Little Bear want, he said finally, not looking up. Another wife? Chief need wife. Want one beautiful, good cook. He put his face into the mess tin and licked it clean. Then he looked up. With Iroquois, mother find wife for son, but Little Bear mother not here. Omri be mother and find. Ooh, here's an idea for symbols. Maybe you want to add to your symbols for your bear skin or your buffalo skin.
I have wife.
Oh, you have wife in yours? Yeah. Omri couldn't quite see himself as Little Bear's mother, but he said, I might try. I think there were some lady Indians at Yaps, but what if I get one and make her real and then you don't like her? I like you get. Tomorrow. Little Bear grinned at him happily, his face smeared with craving. Patrick had come up behind him. Let's put them together and see what they do. Omri jumped up quickly. No! Why not? You idiot! Because yours has a gun, and mine's a bow, an arrow, and one of them's sure to kill the other. Patrick considered this. Well, we could take the weapons away from them. Come on, I'm going to. And he reached toward the bed. Just at that moment, there was the sound of steps on the stairs, and they froze. And then Omri swiftly moved to the dressing-up crate. Enough to hide Little Bear, and Patrick sat down on the end of the bed, masking the poor cowboy who was still toiling along over the humps of the quilt. Just in time, Omri's mom opened the door in the next second and said, Patrick, that was your mom on the phone. She wants you to come home right away. And Omri, it's supper time. And then off she went. Omri opened his mouth to protest, but Patrick at once said, oh, okay. And with one movement, he had scooped up his cowboy and horse in his left hand and thrust them into his pocket. Omri winced. He could easily imagine the horse's leg being injured by such rough treatment, not to mention the matter of fright. But Patrick was already halfway out the door. Omri jumped up and grabbed him. Patrick, you must be careful. Treat them carefully. They're people. I mean, they're alive. What will you do with them? How will you hide them from your family? I won't. I'll show them to my brother anyway. He'll go out of his mind. Omri began to think. He might go out of his. He shook Patrick's arm. Will you think? How are you going to explain? What will happen if you say you got him from me? It'll do worse. I'll bash you. You'll ruin everything. They'll take the cupboard away. And that got through to Patrick. At last, he put his hand slowly back into his pocket. Listen then, you can look after them, but remember, they are mine. If you put them back in the cupboard, I'll tell everyone. I'm warning you, I will. Bring them to school tomorrow. To school? I'm not bringing Little Bear to school. You can do what you like about Little Bear. He's yours, but the cowboy's mine. And I want him at school tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll tell. Omri let go of his arm, and for a moment they looked at each other as if they'd been strangers. But they weren't strangers, they were friends. And that counts for a lot in this life. Omri gave in. All right, I'll bring them. Now give them to me, gently. And Patrick brought man and horse out of his pocket and tipped them very carefully into Omri's waiting hand.